I remember the hospital room as if it were burned into the back of my eyes, bright white walls that made me feel smaller with each passing day. The beeping of machines was steady, almost mocking, like a metronome, ticking away at my sense of worth. I lay there in New York City, my body weak, my spirit weaker. I had been admitted weeks earlier, after my body collapsed under the weight of an illness I hadn't seen coming. The doctors used words I never thought would apply to me: disabled, limited mobility, uncertain recovery. Those words clung to me like chains. I was 32, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I would stand on my own 2 feet again. Dr. Alice Moore, the attending physician, was gentle in her tone but merciless in her honesty. "You have a long road ahead," she said, adjusting the chart at the foot of my bed. "We don't know how much function you'll regain, but therapy is your only chance." She believed in science and progress, but her eyes carried a hint of pity. That pity was worse than the pain. It told me she had already imagined me in a wheelchair, shrunken down, a life of half measures ahead. But the hardest blow didn't come from the disease or the doctor. It came from my parents. My mother, Linda, sat beside my bed one afternoon. She wore her pearls, the ones she always reserved for Sunday dinners and social gatherings. My father, Charles, stood stiffly behind her, arms folded as though he were already finished with the whole ordeal. My voice was raspy when I said, "I need your help, just for a little longer." I thought they would reassure me, tell me that family didn't walk away when things got hard. Instead, my mother leaned closer, her perfume sharp, and whispered words that broke me in ways no illness could. "You're just a cleaner in that housing society." The phrase felt like a knife. My father added coldly, "We're not paying another bill. You've made your choices. Now live with them." Then, without so much as a hug, without a single promise that they would visit again, they turned and left. The door closed with a hollow thud, louder than the machines keeping me alive. I lay there, staring at the ceiling tiles, and for the first time since I had been admitted, I felt truly abandoned. What they never knew, what no one in my family ever knew, was that the story of me being just a cleaner was only half true. For years, I had lived in their shadow, listening to their judgments, letting them think I was nothing more than a servant of other people's dreams. They didn't know that I was the architect of my own empire. 5 years earlier, with nothing but a vision and the courage to risk everything, I had founded Liberty Oaks Housing Society. On the outskirts of Denver, Colorado, I saw an empty stretch of land and imagined families laughing in front yards, children racing bikes down clean streets, and porches where neighbors waved to one another as the sun set. While others dismissed the land as worthless, I convinced a London investor named Oliver Hale to trust me with £75 million. That money became the seed of a billion-dollar community. But I never bragged. I hid my ownership behind layers of paperwork and shell companies. On paper, I looked like a contractor, an assistant, sometimes even a cleaner. I swept the floors of the model homes myself, not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand the work from the ground up. If anyone asked, I would smile and say, "I help with the cleaning." It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. At the time of my hospitalization, Liberty Oaks was valued at over $1 billion, and I held 61% of it. My lawyer, Grace Miller, kept every document locked in a safe in her Chicago office, guarding my secret as fiercely as I guarded my independence. My lead builder, Ethan Cole, sent me photos every Friday, new homes rising, roofs painted in warm colors, porches polished, and waiting for laughter. Of all the designs, the porches meant the most to me. A porch isn't just wood and nails. It's a promise that someone will come home, sit, and belong. But lying in that hospital bed, all of that seemed like another life. I was weak. My body felt like a traitor. My parents' words echoed louder than any memory of success. And though I had money, plenty of it, money didn't warm the hospital sheets or fill the silence that followed the door's click. The bills piled quickly, as hospital bills in America always do. I remember the first statement clearly: $400,000. A number that would have crushed almost anyone. The nurse, Maya, stood by my bed with the paper in her hands, biting her lip. "Do you want me to call your family?" she asked softly. I shook my head and pushed my credit card into her palm. "Run my card," I said. She hesitated, then squeezed my hand. "You're tougher than you look." I didn't feel tough. I felt like the ground had vanished beneath me, and I was still falling. Each night, I lay awake listening to the shuffle of footsteps in the hallway, wondering if my parents would come back, if they would realize what they had done. But night after night, no one came. The only visitors were Maya, with her kind eyes, and Dr. Moore, who was reviewing her charts. Family wasn't supposed to abandon you when you were at your lowest, but mine had. And as much as it hurt, a quiet realization began to grow inside me. Maybe their absence was a gift. Maybe this was the moment I would finally stop hiding who I really was. I began to think about Liberty Oaks differently. Until then, it had been a secret I kept close, a shield against the judgments of the people who never believed in me. But perhaps the truth wasn't something to hide anymore. Perhaps the time was coming to step into the light and show the world what I had built, not for validation, not even for revenge, but because I owed it to myself to stop being small. That night, as the machines hummed beside me, I made a promise to myself. If I could recover, if I could walk again, I would no longer be just a cleaner. I would be exactly who I was, the woman who built a billion-dollar community with her own hands and vision. And when the world saw me, my family would see me too, not the daughter they dismissed, but the woman they could no longer ignore. For the first time in weeks, I closed my eyes and slept. The morning after my parents walked out, I lay in bed staring at the hospital ceiling and thought, this cannot be the end of me. Something inside me, stubborn and sharp, pushed back against the hopelessness. I had built Liberty Oaks brick by brick, against odds that would have crushed a weaker spirit. And now I was supposed to accept a half-life, confined and dependent? No. I made myself a promise. I would fight for 30 days. A single month. If I gave everything I had, if I poured all of my strength into those 30 days, then maybe, just maybe, I could claim my life back. Dr. Moore approved an aggressive therapy plan. It wasn't kind or easy. At sunrise, a physical therapist named Aaron would drag me from my sheets and guide me through stretches that burned like fire in my muscles. At noon, I would practice standing, gripping the rails until my knuckles turned white. By dusk, I would work through endless repetitions of movement that made me sweat through hospital gowns. My body screamed in protest, but every cry of pain reminded me that I was still alive, still capable of pushing against the limits. When the sessions ended, I would collapse into bed, trembling, but I never allowed myself to call it a defeat. Instead, I counted tiles on the ceiling, 1, 2, 3, sometimes up to 50, to distract myself from the pain. And when tears came, as they often did, I pressed my face into the pillow so no one would hear. Dignity was fragile in those days, but I clung to it. I also clung to work. Every morning before therapy began, I dictated 2 emails. One to Ethan Cole, my builder in Denver. Keep building. Pay everyone on time. Don't slow down because I'm not there. Ethan always replied with updates. Roofs finished, driveways poured, children riding bikes on new streets. His words carried me through some of the hardest sessions. My second email was to Grace Miller, my lawyer in Chicago. File the board papers. Keep me as chair. Grace was ruthless, and I trusted her. She never asked how I was feeling, only whether I was ready to sign or approve. That steadiness anchored me. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of therapy, I reached for my laptop and wrote to Oliver Hale, my first major investor in London. Years earlier, he had believed in me when Liberty Oaks was nothing but sketches on napkins and wild conviction. He had given me £75 million when everyone else laughed at my dream. I typed slowly, my fingers heavy, but my words clear. I am down but not done. My body is weak, but Liberty Oaks is strong. Do not lose faith. His reply came within hours. America loves a comeback. So do I. Get well. We'll build more. That message lit a fire inside me. If Oliver still believed, if Ethan and Grace were still carrying the torch, then I had no excuse. My body was failing, but my empire lived on, and I had to rise to meet it again. The days blurred into weeks. My legs shook violently the first time Aaron asked me to stand without the rail. My arms flailed, my heart thundered, and I fell back into the chair after 3 seconds. But 3 seconds was better than none. On day 22, I stood on my own for nearly a full minute. The nurse, Maya, who had become my quiet confidant, clapped her hands and said, "See, you are stronger than you think." On day 26, I took 5 wobbly steps across the room. They were crooked and painful, but they were mine. I laughed so hard I nearly fell into Maya's arms. She cried first, her tears streaking down her cheeks. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had cried for joy over me, and it nearly broke me all over again. By day 30, I walked the entire length of the room, slow and steady, then turned and walked back. No wheelchair, no rails, just me and the ground beneath my feet. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat awake, staring out the window at the lights of New York City. Each flickering street lamp felt like a beacon. I had fought the darkness for a month, and I had won. I wasn't whole yet, but I was no longer broken. The city outside looked different, brighter, as though the entire world had shifted with me. When I was discharged, I didn't go back to my parents' house, or even consider it. Instead, I returned to my small brick house in Brooklyn. It wasn't grand, 3 bedrooms, a narrow porch, and a maple tree in the yard, but it was mine. I sat on that porch with a cup of tea, listening to the hum of traffic and the chatter of children down the street. A house, I thought, always keeps your secrets. It doesn't ask questions or demand explanations. It simply holds you, silent and steady. Mine had been waiting for me, patient as always. I spent those first nights at home relearning myself. I practiced walking from the kitchen to the porch. I practiced climbing the stairs. Each victory was small, but each felt enormous. And every evening, I allowed myself a single moment of stillness, sitting with tea in my hands, telling myself I had survived the worst. It was during one of those quiet evenings that I picked up the phone and called Sofia Reyes, my oldest friend in Los Angeles. Sofia had always been a dreamer like me, chasing film projects and impossible ideas. When she answered, her voice was warm and familiar. "You sound alive again," she said before I could speak. "I think I'm ready," I told her. "Ready for what?" I hesitated, staring at the chipped paint on my porch railing. For years, I had hidden who I was, letting the world believe I was just a cleaner, just an assistant, just someone ordinary. But I wasn't ordinary, and I couldn't stay hidden forever. "To tell the truth," I said finally. "To tell the world who I really am. On TV if I can." Sophia was silent for a moment, then laughed softly. "America loves a comeback, too," she said, echoing Oliver's words. "And you have the best story of all." I leaned back in my chair, listening to the city hum. For the first time, I felt the weight of secrecy lifting. I had survived my illness. I had stood again. And now it was time to stand in front of the world, not as the woman my parents dismissed, but as the woman who had built an empire while sweeping floors. The fight for my body was nearly over. The fight for my truth was just beginning. A week after my discharge, I found myself walking into a television studio in Manhattan, the bright lights already spilling through the glass lobby like they owned the place. The producers had called me after Sophia, my friend in Los Angeles, told a journalist my story. At first, I said no. I wasn't sure I wanted the world to see me so raw, fresh out of a hospital bed, scars still stitched into my body, and my heart still heavy from my parents' betrayal. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this was not just about me. It was about every person who had been told they were just something, just a cleaner, just a worker, just someone ordinary. So I said yes. The dressing room mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized. I had lost weight in the hospital, my cheeks hollowed, but there was fire in my eyes. The makeup artist dabbed concealer under my eyes and whispered, "You look strong." I smiled faintly. Strong wasn't the word I would have chosen, but I let her believe it. Maybe I needed to believe it, too. When they ushered me onto the set, The audience clapped politely. The host, Daniel Reed, shook my hand and gestured toward the chair across from him. His smile was practiced, his suit flawless, but I noticed the way he studied me with genuine curiosity. He knew there was something more beneath the surface. The cameras rolled. The lights hit my face like a second sun. My palms were damp, my throat dry, but I sat up straighter and took a breath. "Tell us your name," Daniel said. I spoke it clearly, without hesitation. For years, I had downplayed myself, swallowed introductions, let others define me. Not tonight. Tonight, my voice carried weight. "And where do you live?" "The United States of America," I said, smiling faintly. It felt important to root myself there, in my country, the place where my fight had unfolded, where every struggle and every triumph had taken place. He leaned closer. "And what do you do for a living?" I paused, because this was the moment that mattered most. My parents' words echoed in my ears. "You're just a cleaner in the housing society." My heart pounded, but I lifted my chin. I was called just a cleaner in the housing society, I said, letting the words settle into the air. That was true, and not true. I swept floors. I emptied trash cans. I polished windows. But I also built the floors, funded the windows, and designed the homes. I own Liberty Oaks Housing Society near Denver. We have 3,200 homes, a school, a clinic, and 2 playgrounds. We employ more than 2,000 people. Last year, our revenue was $280 million, and our valuation has passed $1.3 billion. A ripple moved through the audience. I didn't look at them. I looked at the camera, speaking to everyone who had ever been underestimated. I fought a disease. I paid my own hospital bills. I learned to walk again. I did not need my family's money. What I needed was their love. And I did not get it. I reached for the envelope on the table beside me and slid out the photographs. The studio screens lit up with images of Liberty Oaks, rows of bright houses with tidy porches, kids drawing chalk hopscotch on clean sidewalks, a small clinic with a blue roof where families lined up for affordable care. "This is Liberty Oaks," I said, my voice steady. "This is what it means when someone decides to care." Then I lifted the clinic receipt. The camera zoomed in on the numbers. $25 million donated to ensure families could see a doctor for only $5. "People like to look down on cleaners," I said. "But if a place is clean, it means someone cared. I care." The room fell silent. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the hum of the stage lights. Then the audience erupted in applause, louder, stronger, like a wave rolling through the studio. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I held them back. This was not a moment for tears. This was a moment for standing tall. My phone buzzed in my pocket during the commercial break, vibrating with message after message. Buyers from Boston, a city planner in Seattle, a volunteer group in Chicago offering to partner with Liberty Oaks, and a teacher in Miami asking if she could bring her students to visit one of our clinics. But the message that struck me most was from a woman named Ruth, who said she cleaned offices in Philadelphia at night and watched the sunrise on her bus ride home. "I thought I was invisible," she wrote. "But tonight I felt seen." Her words took me back to a mop closet at Liberty Oaks, where I had once scrawled a message on the wall in black marker. "This room builds the rest." It was true then, and it was true now. Every empire rests on invisible labor. My story was just one example. When the cameras came back, Daniel looked at me with something softer in his eyes. "Is there anything you want to say to your parents?" he asked gently. The question landed heavily. For a moment, I thought of my mother's pearls, my father's folded arms, the way their voices had cut into me like cold steel. I thought of the door clicking shut behind them, leaving me gasping in my hospital bed. I thought of how I had begged, silently, for them to come back. "I wish you had stayed when I could not stand," I said finally. My voice did not shake. "But I have learned to stand without you." The audience went still again, and I felt the weight of my words settle not just in the studio, but far beyond it. Across America, people were watching. Some would criticize me, some would pity me, but others would understand. When the show ended, Daniel shook my hand once more. "Thank you for your courage," he whispered. I nodded, though inside I felt less like a hero and more like a survivor clinging to truth. Outside the studio, the night air was cool and sharp against my skin. The city lights glittered like 1,000 tiny promises. Sophia was waiting for me on the curb, her arms wide open. "You did it," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I told the truth," I whispered back. For years, I had hidden behind the title of cleaner, afraid of being exposed, afraid of being judged. Tonight, I had peeled back the curtain. The world now knew who I was. The world now knew what I had built. And somewhere, I hoped, my parents were sitting in their living room, panicked, realizing that the daughter they dismissed had become a woman they could no longer deny. The truth was no longer a secret. It was out in the open, shining as brightly as the city skyline. And with that truth, I felt lighter than I had in years. By the time I reached my porch in Brooklyn, my family had already seen the television interview. The wooden steps creaked under my feet as I sat down with a cup of tea, trying to breathe in the quiet evening. But my phone buzzed and rattled on the table beside me, message after message, each one flashing with a familiar name. My mother, Linda, was the first. "We didn't know." My father, Charles, followed with his clipped, cold tone in text form. "You should have told us." My sister, Sophie, wrote, "People at work are talking. Everyone knows now." And then David, my brother, the most pragmatic of them all. "Can we meet? This is big." I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time, staring at the screen. They had abandoned me in a hospital room when I was weak and afraid, but now they came running, panicked, because the truth about me was out in the world. Part of me wanted to delete every message, to shut the door they had already slammed in my face. But another part of me, the part that still ached for family, for roots, for the possibility of love, told me I couldn't ignore them forever. So I agreed to meet. We gathered in a quiet, windowless room at a hotel in Midtown Manhattan. The air felt thick, heavy with words unsaid and years of disappointment. I didn't bring papers or my lawyer or proof of my worth. I came as myself, wearing nothing more than a plain dress and the stubborn strength that had carried me through every trial. My mother stared at my hands as if they belonged to someone else. "You looked so small in the hospital," she whispered. "I was small," I answered softly. "But I am not small now." My father, ever the negotiator, leaned forward with a calculating expression. "What do you want from us?" he asked. It was a strange question, as though love was a transaction, something to bargain for. "Respect," I said simply. "And space." They exchanged glances, their discomfort plain. It wasn't respect or space they were after. Soon enough, the truth came out. They wanted a new house, a bigger one, a mansion in the suburbs, perhaps, or a place in the Hamptons. My father asked bluntly if I would buy it for them. My mother added, "It would show you care." I felt something inside me tighten, but I didn't raise my voice. I met their eyes and said, "You already have a house. Keep it. Love it. Fix the porch. I will not be your bank. I will be your daughter if you can be my parents." Silence filled the room. Then I laid down my terms. A one-time gift, $10,000, enough for repairs and health checks. No more money talks for 1 year. If they wanted a relationship, it would not be built on dollars or property, but on conversations about books, or movies, or memories of Max, the golden retriever we once loved. We could talk about anything except my net worth. They didn't like my rules. I saw it in the way my father's jaw tightened, in the way my mother's fingers twisted her pearls. But rules were the only bridge I could offer. Without them, there was no path forward. Sophie broke first. She rushed across the room and hugged me tightly, her tears soaking into my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was wrong." David stood by the window, quiet and unreadable, his reflection dark against the glass. Finally, my father spoke, his voice rough. "You were always stubborn." I smiled faintly. "Stubborn built a city of porches," I said. The next morning, I boarded a flight to Denver. As the plane descended, I looked out the window and saw Liberty Oaks spread beneath me, a tapestry of rooftops, streets lined with young trees, porches catching the afternoon sun. The sight filled me with something deeper than pride. It belonged. Walking through the neighborhood felt like stepping into a dream I had once sketched on paper. Children raced bicycles along sidewalks chalked with hopscotch grids. Parents carried groceries from tidy cars. Neighbors waved to one another from porches painted in cheerful colors. Ethan Cole, my trusted builder, spotted me from his truck and waved, his grin wide and unguarded. Grace Miller, my lawyer, met me outside the small brick office that anchored the society. She handed me a thick folder, her tone brisk but her eyes warm. Inside were new permits for an expansion in Boston, plans for a second clinic, and a letter from Oliver Hale in London. His handwriting was neat and formal. Here's to porches and second chances. That night, I wandered the streets of Liberty Oaks alone. I stopped in front of a modest 3-bedroom house with a maple tree standing proudly in the front yard. The porch light flicked on, and a woman named Helen stepped out, holding her young son's hand. She looked at me curiously. "Are you the owner?" she asked. I hesitated for only a moment before smiling. "I'm the cleaner," I said. Her laugh joined mine, warm and genuine. "And yes," I added, "I'm the owner too." I stood there for a while, watching as her son played in the yard, his laughter carrying through the evening air. It reminded me why I had built all of this, not for the valuation numbers, not for the headlines, not even for the vindication against my family. I built Liberty Oaks for moments like this, for people who needed a home, a porch, a place to belong. As I walked back to my car, I thought about the journey I had taken, the illness that nearly broke me, the abandonment that nearly crushed me, the fight to reclaim my body, and the courage it took to speak the truth on national television. Through it all, one thing had remained constant: the quiet, steady truth that I was never just anything. This is my story, told by me, a woman in America who learned to sweep, then to build, then to stand. My name is on the deeds and, more importantly, etched into the door of my own life. If you ever find yourself passing through Denver, come by Liberty Oaks. You'll find me on a porch with a cup of tea, ready to talk about the long way back and how a house, a city, and even a country can hold you up, even when your own family does not. And if you are ever told you are just anything, I hope you hear my voice in the quiet that follows. You are not small.
Stand anyway.